And what a show it was at the Bomas of Kenya that we saw earlier this week on Monday. Francis Gashuri was there, and you witnessed firsthand what was this interesting show of hostility towards none other than the Deputy President. Watch.
The same headline, they have said that William Ruto is coming to meet demons at Bomas. Now, I am asking myself whether there are any demons in Bomas. Or better still, maybe I can ask them, Olisikia wapi, that there are demons in Bomas. I am finishing. You know, I speak for millions of hustlers, so just give me a minute. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So,
what a show it was that we witnessed there. I mean, and quite a bit of, I think before we saw, you know, this presentation or the making of the case by the Deputy President, it's safe to say that what we had seen before was pretty much of a praise fest. I mean, this was taking place on the President's birthday, was it?
Yep.
And, you know, there was a lot of... I think we talked about it as a praise and worship, it seemed.
Yep.
You know, and there was a few speakers, including the Deputy President. For what it's worth, and we'll fact check him in a moment. You know, Linus, let me start with you. What was this moment like for you? Many saying that, look, regardless of what it was, you know, politically, the Deputy President stood up there, made his remarks, presented his case in what was clearly a very hostile territory. You know, that was different. I mean, I found, for what it's worth, it was different. It was refreshing compared to what we had seen, everything with, you know, the sort of praise, worship to both the President and the former Prime Minister.
It was supposed to be a one-street event, and everyone was supposed to sing Kumbaya, my Lord, and end of story. Praise the thing, launch it, and in fact, in traditional Kenyan fashion, throw some confetti and release a dove or two. That is what I expected. But then we had this speech by the Deputy President, William Ruto, that seemed to come as a culture shock to what was going on here. And then the hostility, of course. There are two things that I could decipher from that. One is the audience was, of course, carefully selected.
Yep.
I think the audience was made up of largely of supporters of President Uhuru Kenyatta and his handshake partner, the ODM leader, Raila Odinga. And so it was an away, really, kind of scenario for the Deputy President. I don't think the Tanga wing of politics was really represented in terms of the audience. But then one thing really comes out of here as well. Are we confusing coalition building with constitution making? I think someone needs to ask this question. Because coalition building is what these habits that we are seeing are about. That now Uhuru Kenyatta has wound up the coalition with William Ruto, and he's got a new partner in Raila Odinga. And so what will happen in a situation like that is obvious. There'll be hostility towards William Ruto because he's now part of the past in terms of the Kenyatta coalition. But we are also confusing it with the constitution-making process. When it comes to constitution-making process, what should be the tone and what should be the mannerisms of that? And Yvonne, you will look at the 2005 referendum and 2010 referendum. It was never around personalities, really. There were issues. And that is what we should be discussing now. If this is about constitution making, it should be about what are the issues that are, is it about the distribution of positions, like has been said, the structure of the executive, the judiciary, and all that? Because when it comes to what we saw on Monday, to me that's more of a coalition building affair. And I want to just point out one more thing that will be very discouraging if it goes that way. Is there probably a sizable chunk of Uhuru and Raila supporters who are seeing this as a coalition building rather than a constitution making process? Because they then need to prepare if it doesn't go the coalition way. Because the assumption to them, to these supporters who are very enthusiastic, is we are writing a constitution, we're making changes complete with names in mind.
Yes.
They have, they think this is the formula, pass it in a referendum, and then after that, this is the structure of government, so-and-so will be president, so-and-so will be prime minister, and all these positions will be shared out. Suppose that will not be the case.
And that is an
our ICU beds are full, remember?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And that's the interesting thing about the personalities. And I think everybody was clearly watching the body language. And I'm hoping we can take a look at some of those cuts, because everybody was reading into their body language, the camaraderie. If we would see what we saw in Bomas the first time, that slap on the back, and was it friendly? Was it not? Considering what was happening there, what stood out for you in the Bomas, the show? You were there. I think you saw this firsthand. You were here watching it.
Other than the speeches and the various things that were said there, I saw two things. One, the BBI report and its content, and number two, the politics of BBI and the politics of 2022 intertwined. Linus talks about the hostility that the deputy president faced at Bomas of Kenya. I look at it from a footballing point of view. I would say the fans were totally against the deputy president. So, as it were, he was playing an away match. And so, whatever he said or whatever he was going to say, the crowd was going to be against him anyway. Actually, the only member of Tanga Tanga that I saw at Bomas of Kenya was Moses Kuria. I didn't see any other,
the rest
so to say. And I think he probably knew in advance that the kind of reception that he was going to face was quite hostile, and probably that's why he prepared as he did. And you realize that he knew he was facing a hostile crowd, and the idea was to keep his message clear. And you could even see an attempt to tinker with the protocol at one point, that didn't work, as it were. And it would have been difficult for him if he had spoken, and then the ODM leader spoke, and then finally the president. But the fact that the ODM leader spoke, then the deputy president spoke, and then the president spoke lastly, you even realize that at that point, the president even shelved his written speech and opted to go off-cuff. To date, we haven't seen the content of the written speech. I would really want to know what was in the written speech, because quite a number of things may have changed as a result of what the deputy president said. And it was only necessary that the president responds politically to the speech by the deputy president. And the easier way to go about it was not to go the written speech, because it would probably not have resonated with the crowd. Off-cuff was to be met with another off-cuff.
And in line with
the
that,
off-cuff that was to meet the off-cuff by the deputy president had also had to do. It also required some content that had to do with him directly that probably people didn't know, and that's why the handshake issue came. That he knew about it, and a few other things.
I want us to listen to that, because I think when you talk about the off-cuff, and did we perhaps see the most direct statement by the president to his deputy, addressing why he's been so unhappy with him lately? All of these things we've been seeing is sort of shadow boxing. But, the president talked about what's happening between him and the deputy president, an analogy of hii ni kama relay.
Race hii ni ile ya kuhandover, unajua? Si ndio? Inaitwa relay. Unakimbia ule mwingine anakugojea pale, anatakikana kukugojea ndio ashike aendelee, si ndio? Lakini sasa my brother William hapa amepinduka, anakimbia nyuma. tutafika tu. Jameni, tufanye shughuli hii muhimu kwa taifa, shughuli ambayo itatusaidia na itasaidia kuleta umoja na amani katika taifa letu.
Yeah, you see, at that point, when the deputy president spoke, I would imagine he was telling him, unachoma bro, unachoma, you know, because it's not something that was probably expected to be said at that point, but it did not come as a surprise. If you listen to what the president said in Nyeri on Sunday, he may have spoken in Kikuyu and many people probably didn't understand what he was talking about, but he gave a hint.
What did he say?
He was basically saying, you know, tungoje, tuache siasa, tupitishe report, and then politics will come in later. But also gave you subtle indicators of what he has been saying behind the scenes. Not necessarily directly as he did on Monday, but this was a response to quite a number of things that have been said. But it tells you how their relationship has been. That maybe, as we have said here, competing political interests. One is looking at the legacy issue, the other is looking at the succession issue. So that disconnect has been obvious. Now it was verbalized. And I think verbalized by the president, you know, in ways that, and, you know, the politics came out and you know, all of these things were said. Jamila, finally.
Yes. Finally.
We sort of saw them addressing each other, even if not directly, but this was something. And
all this was because of, as Gashuri said, the deputy president going literally almost off script in terms of what was expected at the Bomas meeting. Because before he spoke, it was tunasifu, tunaunga mkono, sisi vijana, 16th century contraption came in there. A lot of issues were spoken. I think other than the deputy president, who actually had sounded like he had really gone through the report and he was pointing out the issues that to him he needed to speak about. I think it's only ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi who actually also had looked at the substance and was talking about the substance of what was contained in the BBI report. And then the president speaks and says directly for the first time that things were okay until now. William akaanza mambo ya 2022 hapo katikati, and it was almost a session of roho ilifunguliwa to some extent, even him saying that he's guilty of the tribal politics that we keep talking about as a country. We vote along tribal lines, and the belief that we have mtu wangu akipata sisi wote tunapata. I think we need to listen to that soundbite, the president speaking about the tribal nation, and then we can continue.
But the fact of the matter is that we are a tribal society. We want to get away from it, but that's what we are. And this is what divides us, because we pretend we are national leaders. But when the time comes, we switch to vernacular and we become what we are. And these are facts. Tusidanganyane. Na kila mtu anasema ile watu wako namna hii sijui, na wale wako hivi, na wale wako vile, na wale wako hivi. I will also admit today that I've also been part and parcel of that negative politics. Yeah. So
and the president, I think, talking about the issue of inclusivity, that is a big component of what the BBI report is talking about. Why they created those extra seats, the prime minister, the two deputy prime ministers, and then the deputy president, I think, trashed it a bit to some extent, saying, okay, megawa. What about the others who are left? Because this inclusivity issue is very important in Kenya, because we all need to feel like we are part of the power that runs this country. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. But I think we need to look at it in terms of, it is a fallacy to think that an election you won't have losers. You'll always have winners and you'll have losers. But what this new arrangement does, it actually reinforces a coalition prior to the polls. Because mtu akishinda and they're part of our coalition, he'll form a government that would suit them as the winners. Yes, we're creating the office of the official opposition, but still, is a loser, sio mshindi, hayuko katika serikali.
And you mentioned some of the other speeches that were made that were substantive, and we'll get into that in a moment when we take a look at what they said that was interesting in terms of critiquing that. But speaking of inclusivity, the president then claimed that his deputy was included all along in the handshake. Can we listen to that, get a comment, and then we'll come back and wrap this up and start to talk about the substantive issues. So the deputy president knew about the handshake all along?
Along that path, I kept him abreast of what was going on. He was part and parcel. It's the truth, I'm not lying. Ask him, he's here.
Is that to be believed? Who would then ask the deputy president after what he said? Okay, ask him, he's here. Who would then have asked him? I mean, there seemed to be a lot of unburdening of certain secrets or ongoings behind the scenes.
President Daniel Arap Moi, our second president, used to say in functions, he'll not complete a sentence and then he'll say, "Hiyo ingine mtasoma kwa magazeti." Now, you would think we, the press, reporters in the field, would at the time be called then later and told,
Ndio hii.
There was no such thing. So I think Uhuru pulled one on us yesterday, and especially for the guy he knows, because they were in the room, and you couldn't go to the deputy president and ask him, did you know about BBI? But what Monday also did, what Bomas did was, for the first time, and I think Francis highlighted it in his story on Monday, saying that that was the first handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President for the first time since the outbreak of COVID.
Yeah.
So it was the first time, and they did it the
Tuko pamoja way, which was quite ironic considering the events that we've gone through in recent times. This was a different moment. You all remember the tension that has characterized the relations between the two, and it wasn't easy. It was not easy. Let's remember the body language of the president when he got to speak, when he got up to take the podium after Deputy President spoke. He was not happy. He was tense. He was angry, I would say, because the script was going off key because of what the Deputy President had done. The first thing that happened was the written speech just disappeared. It couldn't be presented because it would not respond to what the DP had done to the meeting. And two, there was obviously the aspect of how can you rain on my party?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be this way. We're coming here for a very, very specific purpose. Everybody's going to cheer about this document, and we finish and we go and start the debate. I think the DP took them by surprise in terms of introducing the debate on the floor. But also, the president took the DP by surprise by, for the first time, discussing his relations.
Exactly, yeah.
With him. First, he said, this guy has been running ahead of time.
Yep.
2022 came up. It's something we have pointed out ourselves here as something that potentially raised the tension within Jubilee. So he brought it out this time in person. He has never done that. Yep. And two, he also basically spoke about the handshake. Look, what has been the notion all along? That the DP was kept off and informed completely about the process. What did the president do? He said, even the selection of the members of the
task force.
He did,
task force.
How was they?
Alinisaidia kuchagua some of them. So there was something, I mean, that was the second biggest story in my view. I think the president and his deputy, their relations for the first time played out, and they verbalized it. I don't know about what the deputy president whispered to the ear of the president, because I think he interrupted something.
Yeah.
the president was on a roll, you know.
Usichome, bro, usichome, or something
So
like
I
that.
think it's, come on, end it there.
End it there, yeah. And it was the first, I think, even though it was a tense moment, there was that little bit of that camaraderie that we had seen in them from 2013, and you know, that sort of playful nature, but it was also very tactful, you know,
very important thing you bring out because very important thing you bring out because tension was a big aspect of the whole event. Up to the moment the president started thanking certain persons, he started with his handshake partner Raila Odinga. Then he thanked Deputy President William Ruto. When you look at that tape, that is the moment he starts. That
was the turning point.
Turning point. He starts lightening up. He stopped leaning awkwardly on the, you know, he leans that way when he's upset. He needs the nearest support, and you know, what you have at that time is the podium. So he relaxed and stood upright that time after thanking both the former Prime Minister and his Deputy President. And then he relaxed. And even when he was executing the issue of the baton, the issue of 2022, the anger was already subsiding. He could actually project that without causing more tension in the room. It came out as light, but I think these are serious issues that separated them.
The message was home.
Just before you do that, I looked at it as, you've given, let me also give a bit. There are two issues that have been dominant prior to the BBI report launch. Number one, the handshake question. And number two, the BBI process. On one hand, it has been said previously that this was between the president and the ODM leader. The impression that was created was that only them knew about it. And once in a while, they have given us snippets of what could have led to it. You remember when the president the other day told us that they sat in a room, tense, they did not even speak for hours, they took a lot of tea and so on and so forth. So every so often, when an opportunity arises, the president gives us an idea of what happened or led to the handshake. And,
well, if it's to be believed, because...
Yes, and also on the other hand, I don't know whether you remember an interview that our former colleague Hussein did with the deputy president, and the question of whether he was aware of the handshake process came up. And he said the president kept him abreast, kept him informed, consulted him. And what followed thereafter? The criticism that you are not aware, this was not between, you were not supposed to be there, this was to be between the president and the ODM leader. Now the president is asking us, muulizeni. It's not like somebody would have said, okay, ngoja kidogo, Mr. President, why are you?
Like pause right there.
It wasn't going to be possible at that point. And number two, the BBI process. You see, the BBI is a fruit of the handshake. And if the impression was that the deputy president was not involved in the handshake, then so probably was he not involved in the BBI report. But here is the president telling us he was not only involved in the handshake, but also in the constitution and the selection of the BBI task force. So if you are involved in the selection of the task force, then so you're also probably aware of the outcome of the task force. So do you disown the BBI process or don't you disown the BBI process?
Exactly, you know, sort of throwing him under the bus, you know, when it comes to it, that he cannot say he didn't know and was not involved. We want to take a break right now. The hashtag is NewsGang. When we return, we'll be talking about some of the substantive issues that came out of that BBI launch. We'll be taking a look at what's happening with the judiciary, as well as with the police, the executive, all of this winner takes all, as well as some of the other speeches and remarks that stood out. When we return, hashtag is NewsGang at Citizen TV Kenya. Will be back in a moment.